This is the YouTube video to go with your Biodiversity 6.3 notes. If you haven't already, you need to go up and get those notes for yourself. Now, at the beginning of the notes, it asks you two questions, and it says there before we begin. So I want you to go ahead and pause the video and complete those two questions. The questions are, what do you think biodiversity means? And is biodiversity important, and why? Once you've completed those, we're going to go on and actually start talking. So I want you first to think about the word biodiversity. What does that actually mean? Remember to break it down. We've done this with some other words. So bio means life, and diversity means the different things. So biodiversity is going to be different things within life. So our first set of blanks, these should go right along with the notes. It says biodiversity is the total of all genetically based variation in all organisms in the biosphere. That means biodiversity is adding all of the different things in an area together. The more different organisms, the more diverse the area is. Let's break that down a little bit. So biodiversity is the total of all genetically based variation. That's a lot. What biodiversity really means is it is all of the different living things that exist in the biosphere. Now remember that word biosphere, that was from the last unit. Do you know what it is? Biosphere is all the living things. So biosphere is all living things. You might want to write that to the side of your notes if you don't remember. So the biodiversity is just how different all the living things are in an area. The more differences there are, the more diverse that area is. And diversity in general is good. There's three types we're going to talk about. The first one here is ecosystem diversity. It's the variety of habitats, communities, and ecological processes in the biosphere. But what does that mean exactly? As we're going through this, if you're not certain what things mean, you either need to stop and ask me, or you need to listen again, look them up, or write down what I'm saying to give yourself some examples on the paper. So ecosystem diversity, what this means is that the ecosystem itself, the abiotic factors, the non-living factors, are diverse. There's a bunch of them. So a diverse place might be a forest, and that forest might have tall trees and short trees, and it has good dirt that they can grow in, and maybe a stream. Maybe there's a place with a bunch of rocks. All of these different sections of the ecosystem are all going to be helpful to make it diverse. Gives different homes, different habitats, and different microhabitats. We just talked about that in 6.1. So it gives you big places, the big habitats, and small spots for people to live, the microhabitats. So ecosystem diversity isn't about the living things, it's about all the non-living factors being different. Species diversity is pretty obvious, I think. It's the number of different species in the biosphere. Remember that a species is one set of organisms that are all genetically similar. So like turtles. There's a bunch of species of turtles, right? There's a bunch of different types. And they all fit into their own categories depending on what they look like and what their DNA says. Just like people, humans are a species. We all belong together. So species diversity is literally counting up all the different species. So in that forest example, that would be like going in and counting up all the deer and all the squirrels and all the trees of a certain type. The more species there are, the more diverse its species diversity is. Now the last one is genetic diversity. This one's a little bit more complicated, so you can see I've added an example for you. So genetic diversity is all of the different sets of DNA in a certain species. This increases the diversity of each species. Now this is as individuals. So look at the example there. It says dogs come in a lot of different colors and sizes. They have a lot of genetic diversity. Elephants do not have many differences between each one, so their genetics are not as diverse. So let's talk about the dogs. There's a lot of different species, or I should say types, not species, a lot of different types of dogs. So you can look at big dogs like Great Danes, or super little dogs like Chihuahuas, or in the middle like a Corgi or a German Shepherd. They all belong to the dog species, but they're all very different still. And all of those differences go down to its DNA. If you remember, DNA tells us who we are. So DNA told the dogs what to look like. All of those different types are all different DNA. So dogs are very genetically diverse. They've got a lot of different genetics that they can use, and that is good for their species. If something bad happens, if there's some sort of sickness, then they're not going to die because they have good genetics, a bunch of diverse genetics. So some might die from the sickness, but not everybody. Elephants was the second example there. Elephants don't have a lot of diversity. Right? There's not a lot of shapes, sizes, colors, and actions that elephants do. They're pretty much one size, and they're pretty much one type. So if something comes around possibly to try and kill them, if there's some sort of disease, they could die because they don't have a lot of good genetic diversity. Let me give you a real-world example that happened. So corn. You know about corn. We eat corn. We use corn to make cornbread and all sorts of things. Well, corn is not very genetically diverse. When we started growing corn as a crop, we got very, very specific on what we liked. So all corn is almost the same. There's a little bit of variety, but there wasn't always. Well, corn almost went extinct. So what happened was that corn got a blight. A blight is an illness that only plants get. And it was killing the corn. It was killing all the corn, and there was nothing they could do to stop it because all the corn was susceptible, or all the corn was able to get this illness. So corn was going to go extinct. And we use corn for a lot of things, not just to feed us, but it's some of the main food sources for chickens and even pigs. So we were in a big struggle. So what happened was one farmer decided that he was going to go and save corn. So he needed to figure out how to save corn. Well, corn comes from Mexico. That's where it's originally grown. It's called maize there. So this scientist walked Mexico. Literally, he just walked all around the country of Mexico looking for corn. And he found this little patch of ground that had some corn on it. And he got to take that genetics of that original corn and mix it with our crop corn, and he actually saved the corn species, which is why we still have corn. This was an example of genetic diversity going bad. And you know, we actually have something to fight against this now. We have a World Seed Bank. And I would suggest you might want to go look this up. It's actually pretty cool. So the World Seed Bank is this place, I believe it's in Iceland, and it's underground, and it's a vault full of like every seed we have so that we never lose a species again. It's pretty cool. So the big question on your paper now, is biodiversity good? Well, the answer, yes. All diversity in an area is going to help plants and animals from going extinct. But it can also help us with things like medicine and agriculture. If we have this diversity in our ecosystem, if we have all these different species, then we know that we have stuff we can use and stuff that will help us live and just everything. If biodiversity goes down, then we won't have things for us to live. So it's really good for things to be diverse. It's great for all of them. We should have ecosystem diversity, species diversity, and genetic diversity. That makes like the perfect biome, is if there's differences for everything. Now, one of the big things, I want to dive in a little bit into the ecosystems. We're going to talk real quick about ecosystem services. An ecosystem service, they're the benefits given to us from the ecosystem. They're done naturally by the ecosystem, but we also need these things in order to live. So ecosystem services are not things that we do, it's things that the environment does for us. One of the easiest ones to think of is our oxygen. Most of us know that trees make oxygen. Well, are they doing that for you? No. But because they do it, we can live. So these services are things that the environment's going to do whether you want it or not, but they're very helpful for us to live. And if you flip over your notes, there's a list of 7 there, and we're going to go through each one so that you don't have to write them down, but you might want to, over on the side, write some examples as we talk about them. So the first ecosystem service is purifying water. This one's really important. We need our water to be pure so that we have clean water. On your paper, it says that wetlands and intact forests along rivers and around reservoirs filter and clean groundwater. It preserves buffer zones that perform these natural processes. A buffer zone is an area in between the land and the forest. Well, I guess the forest is the land, and then the reservoirs, which is just water. And these help clean water as they go from land to the water. So around rivers, it's really good to have a bunch of trees. These trees will help clean the water. Now, it's important for us because we want our water to be clean, even though we purify it still. It's much better than if we don't have those. But also, it's really important for animals. If the water is not clean in the river, then no organism is going to be able to live properly because they all get water from the river. They don't all have taps in a house like we do. So purifying water is very important for all living things. The next one is the buffering effects of weather. You may not have ever thought about this, but on the buffering effects of weather, it says living things can assist in forming a border to protect the earth from storms and other weather. So these same trees that are in between the shorelines and the land that was helping purify the water can also protect us from weather. So weather, we're talking about storms. So when a storm comes in, maybe like Hurricane Dorian that's happening right now, those storms can tear up everything and ruin a whole place. But when we have this living border, this border of trees and plants, it can help protect the earth more than if we didn't have them. Our next one, this one really affects us much more than the water ones, is pollinating. Now, pollination is when bugs will help our plants reproduce. Remember, plants need pollen to get to the seed of another plant in order to make a seed that's going to grow into a tree. And on your paper, it gives you some examples of bees, flies, butterflies. They pollinate crops, so that's all the food that we need to eat. But other organisms, like beetles and bats and hummingbirds, pollinate other plants. It's really hard to pollinate a plant. Think about it. If we didn't have bees and bugs and butterflies and all those, people would have to go around and pollinate every single seed we ever need to make plants. That would be really hard and would take a lot of time. You know, sometimes farmers, especially big farmers who are farming a lot of stuff, they keep bees on their property. And they keep bees on purpose. They actually give the bees homes and help take care of the bees because the bees pollinate all of their plants for them. It makes the farmer's job easier. Now, on the flip side, regulating pests. So we have living things that eat other living things, specifically ones that are annoying or damaging. One of the biggest ones here is mosquitoes. I hate mosquitoes. I don't think there's anything great about them for me. But I love bats and birds and other things that eat the mosquitoes. So regulating pests, other organisms eat those mosquitoes for us. Another good one that we see a lot more here is spiders. Spiders help us. They kill a lot of bugs and other things that annoy us. The next one is food production. This one seems pretty obvious. We eat animals and plants. We need the ecosystem to help provide for us. This is really important for a lot of you guys. I know this might be a dumb question, but do you hunt? Do you fish? I know most of you do. If you hunt and fish, you are using this ecosystem service all the time. Because remember, hunting and fishing, the ecosystem had to help make those living things that you're going to go get to eat. So the fish were grown in the ecosystem, and they weren't necessarily grown for you, but they're there, and now you can fish them and you can eat them. Same thing with deer. We have food. Now, we produce some of our own food as, crops and all that, but not everything. If you hunt, you are collecting food from the ecosystem. The last two are a little bit more confusing. So nutrient cycling. This is just cellular respiration and photosynthesis. So photosynthesis and cellular respiration. We do cellular respiration. That's when we breathe in carbon dioxide or we breathe in oxygen and out carbon dioxide. Now, plants, it says here, do the opposite. They remove carbon dioxide and add oxygen. That's really important for us. We need oxygen to breathe. So the plants make oxygen for us. We, in turn, make carbon dioxide for them. So we kind of work as a symbiotic relationship, right? A little symbiosis there. It's mutualism. We both benefit. They get carbon dioxide from us, we get oxygen from them. This is one reason why it's so important to have trees around. Now, we don't have a big problem down here with trees. We're out here in the, not so much in the city, we're in the county. We get a lot more trees around, but in the big cities, there's not a lot of trees to go around. So that means there's not a lot of oxygen to go around. So it's important to maintain a good amount of trees in the world so that we have enough oxygen to breathe. The last one is maintaining soil structure. This is when we're going to start talking about those detritivores. Detritivores, if you remember, they ate dirt and helped make the dirt even better. So they ate the dirt, and then they would take out nutrients, they would add nutrients, and they would make that dirt really healthy for the plants to use, and then for us to use to make plants. So these are our 7 ecosystem services. We've got purifying water, buffering effects of weather, pollinating, regulating pests, food production, nutrient cycling, and maintaining soil structure. All of these things, remember, are something that the ecosystem is not doing for you, not on purpose, but it's really helpful that they exist. And all of these services are needed, and we need them to continue to happen. If they don't have these services, we would have to figure out how to do it ourselves. And it would be impossible. It would cost way too much money. Imagine if we had to go around and pollinate every single plant in the whole world. And we had to regulate every single mosquito in the whole world. And we had to purify every single bit of water in the whole world. It would be too hard. We need the ecosystem to be good enough that we can use it. So it's really important that when we're living our lives, not that we're crazy environmentally friendly. I know a lot of you guys think those people are hippies and aren't cool, but we do need to consider protecting the ecosystem enough. It doesn't mean that you have to change your whole life, but it's something to consider, right? I like to drive my car. I'm not going to stop driving my car, but maybe I'll get one with better gas mileage, or maybe instead I'll do something different, like I'll use less lights, or I will take care of where my food comes from better, or I'll plant some trees. Something to kind of offset the bad things we do to the ecosystem to help keep these services existing. Okay, we're at the end of the PowerPoint, which means you should be at the end of your notes. Go ahead before you get off here and double check that all of your notes are completed. If they are, you do not have to turn this in, but you should show them to me. Then you can move on to your next assignment.